Here we go, everybody. We're gonna set this strut up in the Strut Tamer spring compressor. So this thing's mobile. If you look at it, pretty cool. You can roll around the shop. We're gonna mount this strut into this machine, and we're gonna actually take it apart. So there's some specialty tools you need, but there's ways around it sometimes. But we're gonna use all the tools that we have available here and take this thing apart. So I have the bottom set up. If you look at this, the coil spring has to go into these fingers right here, and then they get locked in. So you actually set it all up, try to bite the same amount of coils on the spring on both sides, which I'll show you how to do that. The bottom's already in there. You have it all locked down. So basically, we're going to take this and pivot this in. Get it set up on the spring. Get it locked in there. And then we bring this is a safety finger to hold it in better. So we bring that up. And we lock this in there so it doesn't want to come out. It stays locked in there so it can't come out and pieces fly out and hit you and hurt you. So right now it's set up pretty straight up and down. You can move it around. Doing this, you can move it around so that it's different angles. We're going to see how it goes when we start to tighten it up. But we're going to tighten this top part up and collapse this spring until there isn't any pressure on the strut and the upper mount. And hopefully we don't get hit in the face with this if it comes flying out of here. So we're going to collapse it until this is loose, which it almost is. So now, see, that's flopping around. Take this special tool here. You look at it, it's a big special ratchet. It's got a socket that you can see through. So that's going to go on top of here. And then we have another socket on a ratchet to engage the top of the strut, the rod that goes through the strut. So hopefully this will work. And we're going to try to break this loose. Wow, that's tight. There we go. Take the center nut off. You never take this center nut off unless you have a strut in a strut spring compressor. We do have two different kinds here at school. We have a Brannick one. It's mounted on the wall, and then we have this one that we can move around. And once I get this all apart, I'm going to lay it all out and I'll show you all the different parts that I'm taking off of here. And then the strut comes out the bottom. And then you just have the spring in there, which right now that spring is bound up and it's being held in there, which it's a pretty dangerous position. It's locked in, so it shouldn't be dangerous, but there's still possibilities. All right, everything's laid out on the bench, how it came off. We have the nut right here, the upper mount assembly, which is all these parts. So the upper mount, which is the bolt kit and the frame. So there's studs in there to hold it into the car. This is a bearing right here because it is a front strut, so it allows the wheel to turn. And then this is the part that engages the spring. Sometimes this is all together and it's kind of collapsed together in one piece. It comes as a kit. And then there's this rubber insulator that goes on top of the coil spring. And then if we look at the strut, right here, it has a bumper on it so that it doesn't bottom out, and this bellows boot to protect the rod. It should come off, but it's probably stuck on there. Yeah, it's stuck on there. Usually it'll slide off. A lot of times these boots will get all ripped and they fall apart and they fall down onto the strut. The strut has another rubber insulator on it, so the coil spring's not metal on the strut. You always want to be careful. Struts can be gas charged, so it'll usually say on it if it's gas charged. You don't ever want to heat it or cut it because it could explode. We can buy a strut as an assembly. A lot of times they're called quick struts. So it's all one piece. It's the coil spring, the bellows boot, the insulators, the upper mount, the bearing, the nut, and it's all one piece. You get it in a box, you just take your strut out, you put your new one in. That's the most affordable way to replace one of these. But if you don't want to do that, or if it's not available as a quick strut, you buy the blue part here. You buy the strut and you take it apart like we did. You put the new strut in, you reuse your coil spring and all your other parts if they're in good shape. A lot of times though, these bearings go bad or the bushings wear out. There's a rubber bushing in here, the side of here. This collar can wear out if it's not put together right. The way this sits on here, it's got a notch piece. It goes on here a specific way, so it sits down in there. So that could be screwed up. You just have to make sure when you put it together, everything gets put back together properly and gets lined up properly. The rubber insulators, you usually have marks on them where they're sitting against the spring. You can see it on that one, right there. And the end of the spring is. So you want to make sure you put it back together properly and get everything lined up and in place. Doesn't really matter so much with this one because it's a flat insulator, but pretty cool, right? So now I'm going to put it back together. I set everything up the way it's supposed to go. I put the rubber insulator underneath, the plate, the bearings in there, and then the top mount where it has the studs on it that goes up into the car. Then we would take our strut and put it up in through the bottom and get the nut started. But before we do that, we want to check this strut actually. If it's a new strut, hopefully you don't have to check it. But if you take a strut and you collapse it, right, push it against the ground very carefully, or you collapse it down, and there isn't any dead spots as you're collapsing it, and you pull it back out and there isn't any dead spots, which means when you're pushing it down, it doesn't skip as you're doing it. It goes down nice and easy if you can collapse it. And then it comes back out and it doesn't shoot back out. That's actually a good strut. If it has dead spots in it though, there's, you know, the seals are bad inside, and the piston and the valving might be bad inside. The other thing you want to look for, burn marks on the strut, on the rod here, on the chrome rod. But this thing is so stuck I can't get it off. Look for any dents in the frame on your struts. Leaking, of course, if it's wet around the base down here, fluid's coming out, the oil's coming out of the inside and it's running down, that's a sign that it's going bad. A little bit of moisture, a little bit of oil around the top is normal, but if it's soaking wet and the dirt is sticking to it, it's junk. We're going to go over other ways to check shocks and struts in a different video and in a different lesson, but you know, visually inspection of it answers a lot. Struts are also sometimes side specific because of brackets that they put on them to hold the brake lines, how they're made. You know, this one has a bracket on it that you would put your sway bar link into. We're going to take the strut now, put it up in. We got to line up the base with the bottom of our coil spring. We'll feed this up through here. Line up the base with the bottom, and then we can get the nut started on the top. Get our ratchet. This ratchet is reversible right here. Okay. It's nice with the wobble head because you can do this. Makes it like a speed handle almost. Okay. Got a ratchet on there. Tighten this up. We'll torque it when we put it back in the car. Or check the torque on it. Snug it down really good. And then before you back the tension off on the strut spring compressor, you want to make sure that everything's still lined up. It's in the place where it's got to be. The bottom of the coil spring. If you look at it, the bottom of the coil spring is right where it's got to be up against the stopper. The top is sitting in there properly. And then we back it off. And that's going to take the spring tension that's on the strut tamer, or the strut spring compressor, and it's going to put it back on the strut and on the mount. And then you have your whole strut assembly all back together. Got to loosen up these locks. Back this thing off, and then the way I have this in here, it's kind of wedged up. Get it in the right spot to get it out. Oh. There we go. And then we unlock the bottom. Flip the ears up. Your strut is out of the machine. Everything's good. Top should turn. That's what we want. That's it.